Oh, hi, hey, hello, everyone. How are you all doing tonight?
I'm supposed to say that we promise to bring you the very best one-star reviews from all across the multiverse. But you know what? I don't believe it. I don't believe that for 1 second.
I'm rating my driver Marcus 1 star. Not for his driving ability, but instead for his disloyalty and cowardice.
I love the moon. Yeah, moon.
And as an independent podcast team with the entirety of our egos and self-worth wrapped up in the perceived success of our shows, we know firsthand that receiving a 1-star review can, at times, be the most traumatizing experience in a person's life.
I don't even like the mall. I prefer La La Rue leggings and my essential oils. But these kids wouldn't shut up about, let's go to the mall, Karen, take us to the mall. So what am I supposed to do? These aren't my kids. Their well-being is not my problem.
Welcome back once again to the Space Window for what is sure to be the worst podcast in the world, the 1 stars.
This has nothing to do with the movie Space Jam. I love Michael Jordan, and I've always been a fan of Bugs Bunny, basketball, and aliens. I set the gun down on the merry-go-round, turned my back for like 30 minutes tops, came back from the slide, and it was gone. Just gone. No clue what happened there. But that's actually what led me to your product. The 1 Stars is a Good Point podcast.
From what we gather, something emerged from the dwarf star Tiresias and presumably tore apart the golem.
The energy signature of Tiresias changed significantly at 6:43 set time. At that point, all telemetry cut out. We do know that something left a large amount of organic matter in its wake. A trail of an ashy substance can be found leading from Tiresias, past the Gorlan and onward out of the solar system.
All data was corrupted beyond recovery, and this symbol was found repeatedly all over the station.
I know it. I remember. It was there in Eden. I'm sure of it.
The reluctant, immortal Adam Delta 5 must defend the very structure of the universe whilst confronting his past.
Do you remember? No, you do not. You are close. In time.
Where are you now? Where is your true form?
Sailing through the void. Searching.
For what?
In time. Adam Delta 5. In time.
Chain of Being, a mythic sci-fi podcast. Listen now, where all good podcasts are found.
My name is Marty Hatchet. Friends call me Dennis Lunchtime. You can call me whatever you please. Just don't call me a liar, 'cause I'm trying to save your skin here, youngin'. How do I know all this about this tree, you want to ask? I know more about this and any other tree than any person could ever care to. I know firsthand what a threat trees pose to the world. An oak can drop as many as 10,000 acorns a year. You know what was here before people? Trees. You know what'll be around long after we're gone unless somebody does something about it? That's right, now you're getting it. Tree Slayer.
Available only on Channel 34 Sketch Comedy Radio. Available anywhere you get your podcasts.
The New Colossus is a completely unhinged dark comedy reboot of Anton Chekhov's classic play, The Seagull. Content warning. The New Colossus audio drama is rated R for content. Episodes contain explicit language, lust and sexual situations, gunfire, death, dysfunctional conversations, illness, bad theater, anti-patriotism, drinking, and arm wrestling. You'll laugh. You'll cry. We hope you enjoy The New Colossus.
Hi, this is Bob Ramunda, one of the members of the team bringing you the PodTales programming you just listened to. PodTales is committed to free, accessible programming to explore and celebrate the art of creative audio fiction. That means our live panels are captioned and ASL interpreted, the episodes in our podcast feed have accessible transcripts, and all our programming is free. But in order to make that happen, we need support from fans, creators, and listeners just like you. If you can, the best way to help PodTales grow is through a monthly contribution over on our Patreon page. Any amount that you can offer gets you year-round access to our Discord server, early access to episodes, updates from PodTales HQ, and more. Check out the goals on the page for some cool plans we have coming soon. Head on over to patreon.com/podtales to make your contribution today. Help us keep PodTales free and accessible and help us celebrate the incredible world of audio fiction. Again, that's patreon.com/podtales. Thanks.
Arlo got to be 67 years old. Doesn't he have long arms? Oh man, he's got this.
Have you ever listened to the world? I mean, really listened. Just stopped and stood still and listened intentionally. What do you hear? Birds? Traffic? Your loud upstairs neighbor having a solo dance party? Some people can hear the buzzing of electricity, even over other sounds. That's pretty cool. As for me, I never really thought about it much. I could hear, so I could hear. Nothing special about that. I guess if I had to choose, a sound I've always liked is the sound of a dinner party. People chatting, silverware clinking. You never know when things will change, or how they'll change, or how that will change you. Seen and Not Heard, an audio drama about hearing loss and deaf gain, is available wherever you find your podcasts.
And this thing is going to actually shoot out 3 ciphers at you. 37. That's 88.
I think he's rolling on the real table.
That's 25.
He said he was going to use the book for one thing and one thing only, this chase.
This is what happens. The field of view just narrows intensely, and all of you can see 10 times further than normal. But because you're adjusting to this, you can only see 10 times further than normal. It's like looking through binoculars.
Oh, the headaches.
Yeah.
The second thing is that the tarp catches on fire. And the third thing is you can all hear each other's thoughts as you all unanimously scream.
That's my daughter, Hopperscotch. Is she just permanently thinking that at any point in time?
Isn't the first thing Ellie thinks of when hearing fire and seeing 10 times more than normal? The first thought is, that's my daughter, Hopperscotch.
I was gonna say, Hopper, like, his first order of business is that he and Ellie are both still right next to the now flaming tarp, so he's gonna try to handle that. But then he would hear, that's my daughter, Hopperscotch, and he would think that Sarah was there, so he would be, like, looking around, like, is she here? I can see 10 times farther than normal.
So
it's just a lot of things happened at once.
Quest Friends, a podcast about friendship, family, and a statistically unlikely number of surprise daughters. Transcripts and recommended first episodes can be found at questfriendspodcast.com/about.
Paris, 1699, a time of civil unrest, non-hair-related salons, and the most innovative stage magic ever seen in a union house.
You know, I don't know if you can tell, but the excitement is palpable out there. Historically, no one's seen anything like this. In 1699, I mean.
That is Until it wasn't.
God damn it, I don't want to die! I have a reservation tonight!
Which brings us to now. Berlin, 1933. A time of more civil unrest, artistic pretensions, and rising evil, where a self-involved set designer...
You see these? These are Lamarck's own original notes on the Vanishing Box. My most prized possessions in the world.
An American con man.
I'll even lend you the cape.
You have a cape?
I have a sheet.
And a mysterious scientist.
Where was it you said you went again? You can't speak its name.
Ignore their history in pursuit of the mystery behind...
Vanishing Box.
The Vanishing Box.
Vanishing Box. Vanishing Box.
The Vanishing Box.
Vanishing Box. Vanishing Box.
The Vanishing Box.
The Vanishing Act. A rambling absurdity in 12 parts. Coming this summer.
The show's about Lamarck's Vanishing Box. I remade Lamarck's Vanishing Box. Nothing could go wrong. All right? All right, punch it.
Twins, 12 years old.
Kids, the mission isn't a game.
You're right. And it's a mission that you can't meet alone. You need help. Besides, these aren't just any children. They're your family.
Oh, same excuse every time you have chores.
Oh, you'd probably like this one, Alexa. The main character's Puerto Rican like us.
Take back time. American soldier Lieutenant Horacio Mendez is fighting a war on a foreign shore when he's pulled through an interdimensional portal into a time storm.
How cool is that?
I don't do interdimensional portals.
Whoa, that storm sure is close.
Bueno, I'm just glad you're not scheduled to fly a plane in this.
Can we turn on the air?
You know the rules. No air conditioning after Labor Day. When I was growing up in Puerto Rico, we just cranked open the window.
We're in agreement then.
Yes, I'm summoning Alexa and Benito Ventura into the Timestorm. Oh, I can't believe you're here! Oh, twins. Benito and Alexa Ventura, tremendous! You can travel in time, and whenever, wherever you arrive on Earth, you'll exist alive as can be. You can help me.
No, we can't.
Horacio said we both have a choice. You can choose to stay, and I can choose to go without you.
Oh, right. You fly around in some other century. I'll hang here, wondering if you're ever gonna return. Benny.
You're finally ready?
The mission isn't about being saviors of a culture.
It's about preserving and raising up what's already there.
You'll need to redefine what it means to save history. Witness. Find. Remember.
PodTales is committed to free, accessible programming to explore and celebrate the art of creative fiction podcasting. That means our live panels are captioned and ASL interpreted. The episodes in our podcast feed have accessible transcripts, and all our programming is free. Free! Free. But in order to make all of that happen, we need support from fans, from creators, from listeners like you. If you can, the best way to help PodTales grow is through a monthly contribution over on our Patreon page. Any amount that you can offer gets you year-round access to our Discord server, early access to episodes, and more. We have some really exciting things planned. Head on over to patreon.com/podtales to make your contribution today. Help us keep PodTales free and accessible, and help us celebrate the incredible world of fiction podcasting. Again, that's patreon.com/podtales. Thanks.
The universe has an eternal heartbeat.
It's not wrong, you know, to need somebody. Maybe you needed me too, maybe you just did not ask.
Each pulse quiet and across remote dimensions.
If I had my sword, I would run you through.
you would find that the most difficult task of your life. And you're lost.
Though seldom heard, when a beat sounds, there can arise.
Now, a single, deep breath. Center your mind.
I can't.
Yes, you can.
A strange love.
Come to me, my little one.
I spent 500 years protecting this forest from humans. From your kind. I kept this island human-free.
Come to me, oh what fun.
My kingdom spreads within. Hiss. I am a secret king.
My silken thread around you weave.
Their jaws and teeth became material so they could tear at their prey.
Round and round, never leave.
Father, I know you don't want me here.
I walked west of the sun for your touch.
Do you believe in grace?
I walked east of the moon for your kiss.
I loved, and for a time, I was real.
Strange Love, an audio fiction anthology series. Fantasy, sci-fi, macabre. Written and produced by William J. Meyer. Listen on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and strangelovepodcast.com.
People will think we're weird.
So everything's okay?
Mami, cálmate. I'll be fine.
We both know she's fretting about you, but I've been telling her our baby girl is going to thrive.
Aw, Mom. I promise you guys, I have my telepathy completely under control.
Dante's Inferno seems really dark.
It's basically a tabloid with poetry.
Weird twist, but I'm listening.
Well, I have to pay for school somehow.
You know, my offer still stands.
Not this again.
Here's the thing. I kind of do want to tell you, but...
Hey, no pressure. You don't have to tell me.
My parents passed away 2 years ago.
I can't let myself slip like that. Again. It's none of my business.
I remember what freshman year can be like.
You're still in college!
I'm in my senior year. It's different.
God, I wish I had better control.
Tell me about it.
I'm worried about you.
Quit it! I said I'm fine.
I would do everything you do if I could, but I can't.
How do I make this right? So, yeah. My first semester of college is going great. I got this. The Path Down. A sci-fi audio drama about grief, privilege, and superpowers.
Okay, I think this is working. Hi, you're listening to Soundstage, Theater for Your Ears, a new anthology coming to you from Playwrights Horizons. We're a nonprofit off-Broadway theater in Hell's Kitchen, New York City, and we're committed to the advancement of contemporary American playwrights. My name is Adam Greenfield. I'm the theater's associate artistic director. And, okay, so I thought I was going to be recording this introduction in a studio somewhere, gearing up for like a splashy summer release of this series, but instead I'm sitting in my clothes closet in my apartment in Brooklyn, working from home in this new socially distant reality, recording this into my laptop with a mic that I didn't even know I had, which I found in my basement. But if you're like me, you really miss being at the theater right now, which is why we at Playwrights Horizons didn't want to wait a second longer to release this series, but are instead rush ordering this over to you with my recorded in a closet introduction. Soundstage is a new program of our theater, and it will continue long after this COVID-19 crisis. But we felt like the moment to launch this series has to be right now, because until we're able to gather safely in a theater again, we're determined to continue our work to bring artists and audiences together. So we started making these recordings a little more than a year ago. As committed podcast listeners ourselves, we were thinking about the new explosion of audio as a medium, and we started to get curious about what the inventive, adaptable, rule-breaking, genre-busting mind of the contemporary American playwright might bring to scripted audio storytelling. We started by commissioning a handful of writers, specifically trying to build the rangiest anthology we could imagine, written not to be recorded live in front of an audience, but instead to be something that's native to the digital medium, written specifically for audio. Each piece is vastly, dimensionally different from its comrades in the collection. We use theater directors, theater actors, and theater designers, and we're really delighted by the way it's turned out. The first 4 pieces you'll hear are a lush musical mass composed by Heather Christian, an anthemic spy thriller written by Robert O'Hara, a mind-bending participatory new theater piece written by Jordan Harrison, and a collection of cutting-room floor interviews with his parents written by Qui Gwen. And we have additional pieces that are in the works by Lucas Nath, Milo Kramer, Kirsten Childs, Jenny Schwartz, Carlos Murillo, Kate Tarker, and Jeremy O'Harris. It's been an awesome ride making this series. I mean, we're a theater company. We make plays that happen in rooms with people. We didn't really know how to make stuff like this. So yeah, there was a big learning curve in making these. It was a process that was full of surprises as we learned how to do it. But it has been truly a blast, and we're excited to share them with you. We hope you enjoy listening to these as much as we enjoyed making them.
I've seen you prodding the rim of a behemoth skull inside a dream you don't remember, excavating calcite layers of secret and lie. But despite your caution, the object of your searching gazes upon your delicate frame and ingests you from cell to organ to the theory of your imagination. And I do nothing to help you. I just hit record and applaud the 1,000 mouths that swallow. The nesting zone is surrounded by a 500-foot-tall hedge jungle, a rim of tropic glacial paradise, gnawed ceaselessly by paleomythic reptiles.
The stars in the sky were evil, a sin, the souls of long-lost devils dancing naked in the dark.
You think the chameleons have a sense of humor?
I think the chameleons have a sense of everything.
Every few days, a battle fight breaks out. Automatic weapon fire popping against the extra-dimensional moons of megafauna.
Peekaboo, I'll eat you.
Staying sane isn't an option here.
No one is ever going to hear your story. The ones you're trying to tell.
Ectothermic angels on all fours, vomiting out the blood of heaven to bless the battlefield.
They're all going to be eaten.
If you're listening to this story in hopes of finding meaning, go ahead and slice your ears off. Come on, tell me, how close can you stare at the tip of a knife? The Great Chameleon War, a surreal audio drama Visit thegreatchameleonwar.com for more.
Hi, this is Jeff Andreessen, one of the members of the team bringing you the PodTales programming you just listened to. PodTales is committed to free, accessible programming to explore and celebrate the art of creative audio fiction. That means our live panels are captioned and ASL interpreted, the episodes in our podcast feed have accessible transcripts, and all our programming is free. But in order to make all that happen, we need support from fans, creators, and listeners like you. If you can, the best way to help PodTales grow is through a monthly contribution over on our Patreon page. Any amount that you can offer gets you year-round access to our Discord server, early access to episodes, updates from PodTales HQ, and more. Check out the goals on the page for some really cool plans we have coming up. Head on over to patreon.com/podtales to make your contribution today. Help us keep PodTales free and accessible, and help us celebrate the incredible world of audio fiction. Again, that's patreon.com/podtales. Thanks.
What?
Has this ever happened to you? You're pouring a bowl of your morning cereal, only to find that in the night your apartment's been overrun by pigeons? Then listen to The God Said Incidental, a dramedy about advice columnists, an absurd city full of gods, and pigeons. A lot of pigeons. The God Said Incidental is currently streaming on your podcatcher of choice, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Radio Public, and more. If you'd like more information about The God Said Incidental, you can find our website at godsaid.incidental.com.
I notice that your first destination is Arabella, but that's not on your way.
It's the first destination the writer went to. It's sacred.
Oh, how excited are you? On a scale of 1 to 10.
1 billion.
I thought the waters at Coast Venus were clear. That's something else.
Visitors. Of course.
You're Captain Valeria, right? Of the Ultramarine?
Yup, that's me. And that's her, the Ultramarine.
Sentimentality is a virtue of ours. It is ingrained in our people.
I'm sure such a thoughtful gift will cheer her right up.
One of the most important people we have to meet is in Arabella.
Who was this person?
No one knows, actually.
Signed Venus, Part 1. Listen on May 27.
Do you two know anything?
Tomorrow I'll do something out of stories.
And I'm at the land acknowledgement. Okay. Well, welcome to PodTales 2020. I'm T.H. Ponders, one of the organizers of PodTales. We're so excited to be putting on programming devoted exclusively to imaginative audio storytelling throughout the month of November. Today, we'll be treating you to the panel Fiction Podcasts for Young Listeners. Thank you so much for joining us. At the top of this program, we'd like to offer a land acknowledgement, a statement that pays respect to the indigenous people who live here and who had their land stolen from them by colonizers. It is only the very first, barest step in what we can do to support indigenous people today. The following acknowledgement of what to keep in mind as we participate in this digital space is written by Adrian Wong of Spiderweb. Since our activities are shared digitally to the internet, let's also take a moment to consider the legacy of colonization embedded within the technology, structures, and ways of thinking we use every day. We are using equipment and high-speed internet not available in many indigenous communities. Even the technologies that are central to much of the art we make affect indigenous people worldwide. I invite you to join us in acknowledging all this, as well as our shared responsibility to make good of this, and for each of us to consider our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship. Next, I would like to thank our sponsors, Sarah Lawrence College and the Sarahs, Fool and Scholar Productions, Fable and Folly, Sleep With Me, Dagaz Media, and Winter Hill Brewing Company. These are major contributors who help sustain PodTales 2020 and allow our show to continue virtually this year. Learn more on our website's sponsor page. PodTales 2020 is completely free. We believe in making the resources we're creating available and accessible to all. If you like what we're doing here and you have the means, please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/podtales. ASL interpretation for this session will be provided by Brandon C. Kazan-Maddox of Body Language Productions. Learn more about Brandon's work at brandonkazan-maddox.com. Please feel free to use the chat feature here on YouTube to say hello and ask a question of our panelists today, as well as over on our Discord. I'll be keeping an eye on the conversation and will pose a few of these questions to the group before the end of the hour. Without further ado, I have the great pleasure and honor of introducing Alexander Danner, a writer and sound designer and the co-creator of Greater Boston and sound designer on What's the Frequency. He is also a member of the sound design team for Unwell, a Midwestern Gothic mystery. He has contributed as a guest writer and or sound designer to Ars Paradoxica, Star Tripper, and Our Fair City. He plays the narrator on Greater Boston and Krog on What's the Frequency, and has appeared as a guest in many indie audio dramas, including The Infinite Now, Mars's Best Brisket, Alba Salix, and others. Take it away, Alexander.
Thank you, Ponders. Welcome to Fiction Podcasts for Young Listeners. I'm going to start with an introduction of our wonderful group of panelists today. First, Katherine Inskip is the editor of Cast of Wonders. She teaches astrophysics for a living and spends her spare time populating the universe with worlds of her own. You can find more of her stories and poems at Motherboard, The Dunesteef, Luna Station Quarterly, Abyss and Apex, and Palutexni, which I should have asked how to pronounce.
That's fine.
Dania Ramos is the creator and head writer of Timestorm, a middle-grade audio fiction series produced by Cocotazo Media in partnership with the Trax Network. Timestorm is a 2020 Webby Awards honoree and was selected for the inaugural cohort of the Google Podcast Creator Program. Dania is a member of Kids Listen, the WGA Audio Alliance, and the Podcast Academy. Finally, Morgan Givens is a storyteller, audio producer, and songwriter based in Washington, D.C. A graduate of the Transom Story Workshop, 2018 Air New Voices Scholar, and former producer for the news and talk show 1A from WAMU and NPR. He's also the creator of the critically acclaimed and award-winning hope punk fiction podcast, Flyest Fables. Morgan's work has been featured on CNN, The Washington Post, and NPR's Morning Edition. We were also meant to be joined today by Kyle Allen Devich of Prism Pals. Unfortunately, they were not able to make it, but I do want to acknowledge them in particular because I think actual play podcasts play an especially interesting and important role in expanding podcasts for younger listeners today. And we don't, I think, have anyone who is currently producing one on the panel as it stands. But I didn't want to leave that idea out of the discussion because I do think it's part of the future we're building. Okay, so to start with, this is going to be a variation on the why do you make your podcast question, but I think there's value in asking that here. In particular, because I think these are shows that have in mind a particular concept of serving an audience and not just a need for self-expression. And there are clear social values at the core of these shows. So I'd like to ask, what is your key goal with your podcast? Why do young listeners need this? And let's start with Dania.
Great. Thank you so much, Alexander. It's so exciting to be part of PodTales and this panel. So I think, obviously we want to tell a really fun, epic, entertaining tale, of course. But one of the other things that we're really wanting to do with Timestorm, which is a time travel podcast about twins from New Jersey who travel in time to preserve Puerto Rico's true history. We really wanted to get aspects of Puerto Rican culture and history that is sometimes overlooked, those historical figures that maybe even me growing up, and both of my parents are Puerto Rican, and I went to that beautiful island, of course, in my youth, and I didn't know a lot of the figures and events that we cover. So that was one of the main goals that we had in mind. But also to center these two Latinx 12-year-old characters in the center of this story. They're the ones who get to go on this amazing adventure. They're the heroes of this tale. And for us, for me, as well as Michael Aquino, who I co-produce Timestorm with, that was so important to make sure that the world we see is being seen from the point of view of these 12-year-old Latinx kids.
Thank you. Okay, and next, let's go to Morgan.
Yeah, so Flyest Fables, initially I started it because I couldn't find anything like it for my nephew that I thought would be helpful to him as he navigates the world growing up as a young Black kid. And then often when I see podcasts or see any type of entertainment that has young Black kids at its center, you can often tell they wrote it for a white kid and they were like, oh no, let's just put a Black kid in that place, And so it's like, how do I make sure that the way they might hear their friends and family speak is not looked down upon? And so I wanted them to hear a piece of themselves. I wanted them to have some magic because often young Black kids don't get magic. What they get are stories about surviving as a Black person. But there is magic in that too. There is joy in that. And so I wanted them to have that, but also I wanted to begin to create a world that young people can grow into, because I know a 7-year-old is not going to get the same thing from my podcast as a 12-year-old. So I wanted it to be something that they could look back on and be like, oh, I have the framework to understand power structures in my outside world. And I didn't realize I was learning that. I thought I was just like reading and hearing about dragons and superheroes, but I'm really trying to teach them how to understand how power structures work and the way they intersect with different forms of oppression in a way that doesn't talk about oppression. And so it's just so they can kind of grow up into it, and then they'll be like, oh, I can make some connections that I didn't realize might have been there when I was a young person.
I really love that idea of aiming to build a show that grows with the audience's understanding of it. That's wonderful. Catherine, this might work a little differently for you with an anthology series that I think you came into after its creation, but I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Sure. Okay. So, Cast of Wonders has been around for quite a while now, and it joined the wider family of the Escape Artists podcasts about 6 years ago, I think. I'm very bad on dates at the moment because COVID is messing with my brain, and I don't even know which week it is, let alone which year. So we're a genre fiction YA podcast. And as part of the Escape Artist family, we share that sort of core mission of focusing on one story told well. So with every episode, we're bringing a new story, a new dimension to our listeners. And we can be very, very varied with that because we're focusing on science fiction, fantasy, and horror, all with that YA feel to it. And we really want to just give that breadth of experience that's representative of our audience. So bringing a story which has that core sense of wonder that really inspires us, but also allows different people to connect with it in different ways, to see themselves and to see other people and to really bring that story to life for them and for their experiences.
Thank you. I think the next thing I'd like to do is really just highlight the different structures for your podcasts, which was something that was important to me in thinking through this panel, is to show a variety of ways that podcasts can reach younger listeners. And so with Cast of Wonders, we have that fiction anthology format, reminiscent of a literary magazine style of story. With Flyest Fables, there's again an anthology aspect to it, but it's stories told over multiple episodes, shifting from story to story after each smaller series ends. But with a single narrator, although multiple voices for characters, because Morgan is a wizard with that. And then finally, with Timestorm, we have a full production audio drama that has a full cast and has an energy that's so much like a classic Saturday morning cartoon. And so these are very different philosophies of show creation and show structure. And I think within that notion, within the framework of the kind of show you make, I'd like to talk about what are the keys to keeping younger listeners engaged with this audio medium. And I'm sure there'll be some overlap in answers, but I think there may also be some distinct elements depending on the format. Let's start with Morgan this time.
Sure. One of the things, it is just me, myself, and I. Those are the resources I had, and so that's what I used. But one thing I try to remember when I create art for young people is that they are young people, and the only thing is they just don't have the framework to put into words what we can do as adults. And so I try to respect the fact that their emotions are as big as mine. Their emotions are as big as anyone else's. And I try not to condescend to my young listeners, my young audience, because I remember when I was a young person, there were things I could understand outside of what my teachers believed I could grasp. And the things that I could not understand, I wanted to push and yearned towards them. I wanted to understand them. I was driven to understand them. And so, as far as the narrator voice, the thing I do is I lean into the child in myself. I allow myself to have fun I don't take myself too seriously, but again, I think it is incredibly important when I'm putting these characters together, when I'm reading this narration, that I pay these young people the same respect that I would pay an adult. When I narrate it for them, that I pay them the same respect for the depth of their understanding and emotions as I would for an adult. Because one thing I'm also considering is that based on how old they are, if they're fortunate enough to have people in their lives who can listen with them, or even if they listen alone, they can go ask these questions when they're striving to understand something outside of themselves. And so I'm also hoping that it sparks conversations in these homes, about emotions and things. And so when I narrate, that is what I'm thinking of. I am finding pieces of myself when I was a child and pulling that into the narration and trying to feed that to the young people. And my biggest thing that I truly think of when I am, writing, I always try to remember they are young people and they can understand more than I assume they can understand. And it is not incumbent upon me to tell them where the limits of their understanding are. And so sometimes as I'm writing and narrating, I will question, is this too complex? And then I ask myself, who am I to tell this young person it's too complex? It might be too complex at 7, but at 10, maybe it won't be. So.
That's so many good points in there. And you really can tell with children's media when the creator is someone who really respects the complexity of the emotional inner lives of children. And when it's someone who just sees kids as little aliens to be entertained. So I think that you make some really critical key points in there about respecting them as people. Let's go to Katherine.
Sure. I think the main thing we focus on is often at the story selection phase when we're first reviewing the stories which get submitted to us. And we rely a lot on the expertise and the diversity of our associate editor team. So these are the first eyes on any individual story. And we have a number of young adults who are part of our team, and they are absolutely essential to us in giving that immediacy of the young adult experience as an audience for our stories. So I cannot sing their praises enough, just being able to bring their youth and enthusiasm and their understanding of what young people today really are going to take away from a different story. And also having a good breadth of experience more generally in our editorial team, and having that understanding of the different own voices stories that come in, being able to recognize, respect, and appreciate the nuances of what is being told that one individual editor might not see. So we do make sure we get plenty of eyes on all of our stories before we move forward with them. I mean, generally we're looking for things which are pacey, authentic, definitely not condescending in any way, and that bring that real emotional connection that our audience will be able to hook into. And I think that's really what we're looking to do with bringing our stories to our audience and maintaining that engagement with them, is to just make sure that it's relevant and it's meaningful, and building that connection with the listeners is so important.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting because in some ways you have to reinvent this question every time, because each story is a new choice, and you have to ask all the same questions every time a new story is being selected, which is its own fascinating challenge.
It's different answers for different people, though. So
yeah, no, that's a very good point. And finally, let's go to Dania.
Sure. I love both of those answers, Katherine and Morgan. So just taking a look at this, specifically at the structure. So the kind of two titles I always go to are Quantum Leap and the 39 Clues book series, right? So Quantum Leap, I think that there is a sense that there's like this relentlessness of the main characters always having to come back, and their journey is not done. They keep having to come back and do more. What does that look like for 12-year-olds, right? Because they have tests that they got to do. They have, friends that are saying, hey, we were supposed to play that video game and you were sleeping. What's going on? So that is that kind of urgency and the importance of, I have this really important ongoing tasks that keep coming back, but I also have my regular life at school and with family and friends. So that played into the structure a lot. But then the idea of the 39 Clues series books, it's these kids, they're a brother and a sister, they go across the world, right? And everything in those books is centered on them. They are the ones who are driving the action. They are the ones who are making the decisions and then really dealing with the consequences of those decisions, whether those are positive or negative. And really, for me, I really wanted to make sure that to model kind of the consequences that I saw in that series in our series. So Alexa and Benny, they make choices and they're not always the best ones, but they're going to have to deal with those consequences, and they're going to have to face their friends, or they're going to have to face, missing the exam or whatever happens in school. So yeah, that's kind of where we were coming from in terms of structure.
You definitely hit close to my heart with Quantum Leap, which I was absolutely obsessed with back when it was running many years ago.
Me too.
I very much appreciate this idea of the children's consequences, children's actions having consequences, and I think that does connect very closely to what Morgan was saying. In that part of having an inner life is dealing with guilt and regret. And, if we're respecting them as humans, we have to respect their capacity to fail. And not just to succeed, and learning to deal with failure is just as important. Thank you. Those were all wonderful, interesting answers. On a little bit more of a technical level, I'm curious whether there are specific things you keep in mind, whether it's a matter of casting your show, choosing a narration style for your show, or sound designing your show. Is there something you do differently when creating for younger listeners than you otherwise might, or if there are just particular key ideas there? And I see we're thinking about this one, so I'll let someone volunteer to go first this time.
Well, I'm sorry, Dania, were you going to? I can wait. Oh, I'm trying to think about that, but I don't present my art any differently for young people just as a person than I would if I were creating a story for an older person, as far as how I put it together, as far as how I sound design and script, and the complexities of themes that I lay throughout my show. Because, I'm thinking about Flyest Fables, and there are sometimes themes that are painful for young people. We touch on sickness and possible death. We touch on divorce, but sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. But no, someone else needs to go, because my brain was like, you can't have it anymore. So I'll come back to me. It's gone.
Okay. I may not have framed this question as well as I might have, and I apologize if I'm making a messy.
You're not. My brain is just out of it.
A lot of what.
Oh,
go on,
ahead,
Dania.
Katherine.
No.
I was just gonna say that I don't know if this is kind of where you're going, but I was gonna say that I also, in terms of the content itself, like, I think when I'm creating, I'm truly just respecting the child audience member as I would an adult audience member, in terms of the content itself. But I'm actually going to speak in terms of on another side of it, of like actually creating the podcast, because there's an aspect that's a little different for us, because we do cast some minors. So that's a little different in our process. So our two lead actors, they are actually so Leilani, who plays Alexa, she actually came to us. She was a teenager when she started, but now she's 19. And Claudio is an adult playing younger. But we do have other guest roles where we cast minor actors, and so we, are talking to the parents. We are going through a process that would. It's somewhat similar because sometimes we would have the audition process, but we are really dealing closely with the parents. And so when we were pre-COVID, actually recording at our home studio, we also, invited the parents to be part of the process in whatever way they or their child wanted to be. So we also would allow extra time if we had a minor actor who was going to be in the studio. We allowed extra time so that there was a lot of space. They felt really comfortable, especially if it was their first time. So we're going to do the read through that we would do always. Of course, we do a script read through with them and let them ask questions. But then when we actually get to like the physical, this is the microphone and this is where you stand and all that stuff, we wanted to make sure that they always feel comfortable and give them the time and space to do that. So that, I would say, was like one technical thing that I could speak to.
That's great. And I do think, the fact of needing children's voices, especially given the format of your show, as an aspect of audience identification, probably is a fairly critical element. I can't even imagine having to cast minors. That frightens me. The only child I've ever cast in my show is my own. And even there, I try to be very careful to make sure that he actually wants to do this.
We have been really blessed to be able to work with such amazing cast, minor adults and children. So it's always a pleasure.
That's wonderful. And Katherine, I was especially curious for you whether choice of narrator is impacted by an awareness of who your audience is.
Absolutely. I mean, with every story, we're looking to bring something different and finding the right voice for that specific piece of fiction. We have collectively across Escape Artists, we've got a wide range of familiar narrators that we are in contact with, some of whom have the advantage of having very young sounding voices. So we don't often end up reaching out to minors for story narration purposes unless it is really crucial for the authenticity of how the story is told. But we're generally, again, it's looking for that emotional connection and the familiarity with the lived experience. And often an older voice who has been through those experiences as a child will have the perspective and the context as an adult to really identify which parts of the narration and of the story that's being told really matter to the audience and how to get that emotional hook really working. So somebody who can be attuned to the key emotional beats in a story is the dream of what we want to do when we find that right voice. Again, it's really just a case of trying to match up that shared context between the protagonist of the story or the narrative voice and the narrator that is sharing it with us.
Wonderful. Thank you. So the next thing I'm thinking about, and this is moving a little further out from the creation process, but I've been thinking about the challenge of finding your audience when you're aiming for younger listeners, and the degree to which that may sometimes require passing through adults first, and whether you rely on adults to get kids interested in shows. And this is something that I think about from the perspective of my own home, where I put my shows on to listen to while I'm washing the dishes, and my son is there. And I kind of wait to see what's going to grab his interest. And so far, it's only been End of Time and Other Bothers, an actual play podcast that is a very odd choice for a child. But it's an interesting thing to watch. And so So yeah, that's my question is, how do you find your audience? And how do you communicate to them even that your show exists and is there for them? So who would like to go first? Katherine.
I'm happy to jump in here.
Please.
I mean, like much of YA fiction in general, we are not an audience exclusively for younger people. I mean, we're very much aimed at being appealing and accessible to 12 to 18-year-olds. But as with all YA, the readers don't stop reading, the listeners don't stop listening. It is something which is meaningful to individuals of all ages. So we do have a very wide audience, and we're strongly embedded in the science fiction, fantasy, and horror community in general. So the parents who are interested in genre fiction will be sharing Cast of Wonders with their family, with their kids, with their friends. But we're also connecting with our audience through the writing community as well. So we are really very, very keen to promote stories written by young adults, as well as those being aimed at a young adult audience. And we have several submission calls a year specifically for younger writers, where we really want to give them a chance to get that first step on the publication ladder, to share their work, their experiences, their passions, and giving those opportunities and trying to bring people in that way, I think is something that I really love doing. And another way we bring people in is through various themed events throughout the year. So our next few episodes are going to be focused on Dinovember. We've got some lovely dinosaur themed stories, which have been curated by one of my assistant editors, Andrew Ho, who is an amazing person. We run a showcase on Banned Books Week every September, which is something which is very, very close to all of our hearts at Cast of Wonders, just sharing the importance of freedom to read. And I think it's a multi-headed thing. I mean, we don't really compete with the YouTube channels that my own kids are addicted to, but there are so many things out there for children and for young people. They will find what speaks to their individual passions. And yes, we skew more to the literary end than some entertainment for younger adults and children, but that's okay, because we do our thing, and we know that there's amazing stuff that we can share that speaks to other interesting experiences as well.
I think it is worth noting just how long the Escape Artists group in general has been around. And as part of seeing just what a different direction you're coming from, because hello, the Escape.
I told you it would happen.
I have no complaints. The Escape Artists group, I was aware of them and listening to them long before I knew that audio drama was a thing. It's a well-established group, and so you're starting from a very different philosophy of how this type of show works, because you developed in a very different branch of the creative world. But I think it's really good to have that other perspective coming in, because there should be cross-pollination.
I mean, it's by no means the only perspective, and it's so lovely to see how it seems like almost every month there is a new sort of article or thing going on about how this new thing called podcasting, which we all know is just hey, look at this new shiny thing. And usually it's because there is something amazing and awesome which is finding a new audience and is really well worth sharing. So, I mean, the flip side is podcasting has been around for ages now, decades. But every time something new comes along, it is bringing new audiences into the medium, and that's fantastic.
So, Dania, so I think it's been a while. So just to reiterate the question, how do you find your audience?
Yeah. So I just want to say, Catherine, I love the fact that you bring in the voices of youth as well into the podcast. That's just so great. So I think you were asking how how the children are hearing about the podcast, and I've found that parents, teachers, and librarians are the ones who are advocating for listening to audio. So that's been kind of the three, if you will, gatekeepers who introduce children to podcasts. That is what I found in my experience. Specifically for Timestorm, we are really fortunate that we are part of something called the Tracks Network. And that is specifically podcasts for their nonfiction and fiction for ages 9 to 13. So it's very curated to that age group. And so we have kind of that family and network that we're part of, as well as Kids Listen. We're a member of this grassroots organization that has amazing content. Again, it's nonfiction and fiction, but there's plenty of really great fiction in there. And it starts from preschool and up. So those are kind of two communities that Timestorm is in, and we're able to do things like, we've done a couple of guests spots on other people's podcasts, cross promotion, that type of thing, which helps kind of, if you're coming to one children's podcast, then you might be interested in another. And then in events as well, we had this big plan for 2020 was going to be our library tours, which oops. But we did actually manage to do a virtual event, which was really great and excellent. And it was different, but I think we were really happy with how that came out, and we're excited to have the opportunity to do more of virtual events and in person. Libraries. I think, because librarians in the school systems and community libraries, librarians are interested not only in literature, but in media and how to share it. So they are really key. They are champions.
My wife is a school librarian.
Okay.
So thank you.
We talked about that ahead of time, right?
And as it happens, literally last week, a history teacher at her school contacted her to ask if she knew of any good fiction podcasts that touch on history. And of course, Timestorm was the first thing on the list.
Thank you.
But yes, I mean, I'm seeing this pattern that you're describing happen in real time through the channel of my wife's work. And yeah, that notion of events where you can actually go meet your potential audience in person, that's a really good point. And that is a big part of the culture of schools and libraries, that these live events exist, and librarians are always looking for good programming. And that is a channel that you can reach out to, and they will love to have someone who can come do an event with their students. So that's a very good point. Okay, and Morgan.
Yeah, so my audience, I wasn't even sure I was going to be looking for one when I started making my show, but part of it is keeping it so unapologetically for young Black people. I think that is key, because when you make something for everyone, you end up making something for no one, and it loses what kind of draws people to it. And so my audience tends to come, funnily enough, teachers, like they were assigning it as homework, but beyond teachers, just older people, because what's funny about Flyest Fables is that I have adults who love it. I have people my age who love it. I've got people who are septuagenarians, who love it. And so I think what has helped me find my audience, even though I am gearing towards young people and the young people are hearing it, it's always so nice to get little letters and emails from them. It's like, oh, I'm doing something right. But what, again, I think it comes back to the complexity of what I allow to exist in my show in different thematic layers, so that older people don't get bored. Because again, if they're intrigued, they're like, oh, this is this cool show for young people. I can introduce it to my niece. I can introduce it to my nephew. And so that's where my audience has come from. It has come from, ironically, when I have respected the young people enough to grasp what I am telling them and what I am and showing them, then older people are drawn to it too. Because when there is that respect for what they can grasp intellectually, older people don't feel like they're being condescended to. And what's funny is I've had older people write me and be like, oh my God, I was like Princess Keisha, stuck, and I just had to keep going. And you're just like, you're 47, And so I think a good part of finding my audience, again, has just been being so unapologetically for young Black people. And then when I introduce queer characters or gay characters or lesbian characters, they're just existing. It's not let's make a big deal out of the fact that this person's queer, because I do not see that in some parts of young people's lives being the thing that it was when I was growing up. And so it's like, how do I also get my audience to lean into what I'm creating? It's like I can show them the world as it should be, so that as they grow older, they will settle for nothing less. And so I'm also trying to imbue this sense of determination in them. And so that's where it has kind of come from. It has come from just standing in the fact that it is for young Black people, and I love that other people love it. But they are the people that I make it for, and I think that resonates in a way that some art doesn't when you explanatory comma it to death, So, yeah.
That's wonderful. And I think your point about older listeners listening to it and finding these connections is yet another illustration of just how real children's emotional lives are, that you can write an inner conflict for a child and it doesn't stop being relevant. And that we are having a lot of the same problems, maybe in a different context, maybe about different things, but the emotional challenge is there throughout your whole life. So that's beautiful. You gave me a good segue into my next question, which is that I did want to invite you to share some stories of responses you've had from listeners. And I think especially with younger listeners, actually getting to hear the impact that you've had does more than anything to show the power of the work you're doing. And so I'm curious if you do have any anecdotes you'd like to share about listener responses to your work. And Morgan, I'm going to let you start with that because you're already there.
Okay. Well, yeah, I've got young people who write in and they're just like, hey, I like to write too. Can you read this and tell me what I should fix? And it's just like, you're a great writer, but I don't tell them, here's what you're doing wrong. It's just ask questions, like, what did the lion feel like when it was, you wrote this beautiful story about a lion. What did the lion feel like? And what did the lion see? And what, what was going on in the lion's mind? And, then they keep sending me more work. Or I've had, parents of young people write me and they're just like, hey, I've got breast cancer and I didn't know how to talk about it with my child, but I can play this episode where the father is sick and that gives me a way to talk to my child about sickness. And I had no idea how to begin to approach that conversation. And so when I get things like that, it just kind of hits me in my heart in a weird way, because those are not things that I expected. But it makes me feel good that it is creating the space for these families to have those conversations, because sharing how you feel is hard. And so if I can do anything that makes it so parents can connect with their children and children can connect with their parents or whoever their guardians are in a way that makes them feel secure, then I'm all for it. But yeah, they're always just like, how do I write this better? And I'm just like, little kid, but it's great. I appreciate having the time and space to be able to respond to them as some of these letters come in. But I often think about the woman who wrote me, who was like, I'm going to play my kid this episode and we're going to be able to talk about how I have breast cancer because I didn't know how to tell them that before. And so, yeah, that kind of just sits with me as a way to remind me that our art does things beyond what we see. and that it serves a purpose beyond whatever purpose I thought, that I created it for. So that's kind of dope.
It doesn't surprise me at all that you get such an outpouring when you respond with questions, because for children, it is a rare experience to be asked a question rather than told an answer. And that is how you show belief in their inner selves, because there's something in there that you don't know, and it gives them an outlet. Dania, do you have any stories you'd like to share?
Yeah, so I have a couple of short ones. That one takes place in a library, and one came from a classroom. So I'm just going to stay with the theme. The first one, we actually did our first listening party at a library, and we had it on a screen with like one of those audiograms. So all that was a static image and a line going through, and we were so nervous. Michael and I were standing in the back. We were so nervous because we're like, how is this going to go? Are we going to keep the attention? Are people just going to walk out? And pretty early on in the episode that we played, there's a scene with the family, and the family kind of sprinkles out Spanish. They're at the table, right? And there was a moment where I just saw a boy, look up to the mother when that was happening, and the mother looked down, and they just smiled at each other, and there was just this notion of like, they are listening. Of course, how did you ever even for a second doubt? They are listening, and it was just a beautiful moment to see that between a mother and her son, that they felt heard. And then the other one, I'm going to actually say, I'm going to read part of a tweet that came from the brilliant T.H. Ponders. And in that tweet, they said, one of my students thanked me for being the first teacher she's had who has talked about Puerto Rico, her home. And when I saw that tweet,
Yeah.
That's exactly why we're creating this show. And it's so important for that child to feel validated and feel like their reality is being told in a story. So those were the two that I can think of.
That's beautiful. And I'm just visualizing that moment, and the fact that they didn't even need to say anything to you, that mother and child, and just getting to witness that. That's wonderful. Katherine.
Sure. I think I have much the same response as Morgan did, in that it's when you are sharing stories which are one step removed from reality, it gives that little bit of extra distance to allow children and young people to engage with difficult subject matter safely, and they can process, they can understand, they can experience, they can develop how they feel about their own lives in a slightly different way. So I think that's one really, really key aspect of what makes this so rewarding. The other thing is just the sheer privilege of being sent stories by young people. And one thing we always do is we will always provide detailed feedback to younger authors who make that first step of sending us their work. And that is such a brave thing to do when you send out your story, something which you've created and is so personal, out to a professional market, and you'll be feeling hopeful, scared, optimistic. You may have some awareness of the odds of actually getting a story published, which are pretty slim. But we are always just so thrilled to just see what people are coming up with, and to have the opportunity to sort of engage with them and say, we really love what you're doing here. These are some things that maybe you want to think about. But again, it's opening up that dialogue and just really showing that we're listening, we are respecting what they've done, and we're respecting them enough to give them constructive critique and support on their journey. And quite often it does result in subsequent publication. We are always so thrilled to publish work from young writers, and it's just the best thing ever when you know that you are giving somebody that first publication, and you can just share that sort of celebration with them. It's amazing.
I have been on your side of submissions for a literary magazine, and so I know the magnitude of the pile of things you have to go through, and appreciate just the incredible generosity it takes to give that kind of feedback to submissions.
Again, this is something I can only thank the hard work of our associate editors for, because as a team, they're amazing. They will read, they'll provide such detailed commentary, and the rest of the editorial team, we couldn't operate without them, because it's their shared enthusiasm and respect for our authors as well. Whether we publish them or not, it's just amazing, and it's just that sense of family within the team. It just makes it easier.
Okay, so it looks like Ponders is back. I hope with some questions from the audience for you.
I do have some questions from the audience. This first one, someone is curious to know if the panelists hit any big aha moments or failure moments, specifically with regards to creating for children. Were there any things that you tried and worked really well, or tried and didn't work very well, and as you've gone on, adjusted your process?
Sure. I can say, Flyest Fables, it has been a learning and growing experience as I've made it. I can hear things that have changed and how I've made it better throughout season 1 into season 2. And I remember in season 1, I wasn't quite sure whether I was going to go like hyper young with talking animals. And so we randomly have a chipmunk named Chipper who we never see again. I just completely abandoned talking animals for the most part. Like, they might pop up, but I was like, as I was growing into the show, I was like, is this how young I want my show to be? Do I have to adhere to the idea that you need talking animals for it to truly be a fable, or am I going to ride and lean into this 21st century fable thing? So I can tell you that was one of the moments where I was like, Chipper and these talking animals with their high-pitched voices throughout the show forever into perpetuity are not going to work. And that was just something that I picked up, and I had already written Chipper in. I was like, Chipper was going to be there through season 2. And I was like, what am I going to do with a purple chipmunk, in this show? And so he just kind of disappeared. So yeah.
Sometimes you just have to let something go.
He's just gone. He's alive, but he's not in the show no more.
I think he should have a sequel, maybe, Morgan.
Don't do me like that.
I was gonna pop in something that we had a good amount of in the first season. Was Michael Aquino is the composer. He writes music and as well as transitions. And in the first, we had actually released the first 5 episodes, and then we kind of remastered and re-released the whole season later on in the year. And we had gotten from those first 5 episodes feedback that that children really were responding to the music. And so we actually leaned into the music even more for the second season. There's a whole thing about rhythm, and so we really said, okay, we got a response with the music, so we just brought that in even more.
Nice, very good. And Katherine.
I think for us, it's the ability to take risks sometimes, because being more of an anthology show, we have different stories each week. And it's when somebody has a really strong response to a particular story that comes in, even though it might not work for some of the rest of us, we see that there is something going on there. And that allows us to sort of take a chance with stories that may not speak to us all as individuals, but will speak to somebody else. And I think it's getting that breadth of stories out there. They don't always work for every listener, but then you shouldn't expect them to. And sometimes they will connect with somebody in just the right way to just really be a powerful experience, and it's worth doing.
I think that connects again to that idea of a story for everyone is a story for no one, which is such a true aspect of writing for any audience. And so, yeah, I love that you have that freedom to, okay, this week we're doing a story for this one group of people who need this story, and everyone else can wait till next week. Ponders.
Yes. Are there any other genres or types of storytelling that you think would really flourish when creating for a young listener that you maybe haven't come across yet, or one that you yourself would like to work in someday?
Oh God, I have so many ideas for podcasts. Young adult, but I really don't. I have yet. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I have yet to see someone truly go into like the deep horror route for young people in a way that respects their ability to be frightened. And I say this knowing that we have tons of horror podcasts. And it's just like one of the genres that is just like busting at the seams. But as far as respecting the ability to scare young people while having underlying messages within it, I haven't seen that yet. Not saying it doesn't exist. I just haven't come across it. But I would love to work on a limited series that was just a 1 or 2 season thing for young people that explored some of the things they deal with as they grow up in a way that frightens them. Because one of the things I loved as a kid was being afraid, but then towards the end realizing I had nothing to fear. And it's like, how do we weave that into a podcast for young people that frightens them but shows them the strength of their fear? I would like to see that.
So many people have such strong connections to reading scary stories to tell in the dark when they were kids.
Nightmares.
Yeah. But remember it as like nightmares, but as a positive experience. Like there's a love for it. So I think that's a really great idea. And there is an opening for that.
It's a really hard line to walk with the more sort of horror-oriented end of stories. I mean, we can go quite dark with some of our stories, but then we will always sort of heavily label them up with content warnings so that people know what they're getting into. Because having a broad audience, you don't always, well, you know that you have to flag up if there are going to be F-bombs in a story, which may they should be there in the context of that story, but there will be some listeners who will just skip that episode entirely. If it's body horror, if it's experience, if it's prejudice, if it's just dark terrors from the outer voids, there will be things which work for different people. But I mean, we're generally looking for not necessarily a happy ending, but something which leaves people emotionally in an okay place. So if they've had that ride, but then they've got that removed from it individually at the end. But yeah, there's a lot of things that we will kind of not touch with a barge pole because we are a market for minors primarily. And if people want to touch on certain aspects of horror relating to abuse, we don't need to go there.
That's fair. I think we are out of time. Is that right, Ponders?
Yes, we are out of time, unfortunately.
So thank you all so much. It was a joy speaking with you.
Thank you.
It was a blast.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming. This session is part of PodTales 2020, 3 weekends of programming brought to you in partnership with the Sarahs, the Sarah Lawrence College International Audio Fiction Award. For a full list of sessions, visit podtales.org. And be sure to subscribe to PodTales on the podcatcher of your choice to find the podcast showcase selections we'll be featuring from now through the end of the month in our feed. As a reminder, PodTales 2020 is completely free. We believe in making the resources we are creating available and accessible to all. If you like what we're doing here, please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/podtales. Finally, we'd like to know what you think. You can find the panel feedback form linked both in the YouTube description below and over on the website event page. Please take a moment to fill that out and help us make PodTales better in the future. Have a wonderful afternoon, evening, or whatever time zone you are in.